The first time I saw the smile, I wrote it off as a win. A fluke. A goddamn miracle. Leo hadn't spoken a word since the car accident 2 years ago. The one that took his father and left my son's voice behind as collateral damage. Therapists, speech pathologists, child psychologists, we'd been through them all. They used words like selective mutism and dramatic response. I used words like please and just one more sound, baby, for me. So when Dr. Albright's special program, the Chrysalis Center, promised breakthroughs, I signed the paperwork with a hand that trembled with a hope so desperate it felt like fear. After the third session, I was pulling up to the curb of the bland, beige building when I saw him. Leo was standing on the pristine lawn, not with the other kids, but alone. And his mouth was stretched into a wide, perfect smile. My heart did a thing. It soared and then it plummeted, all in the space of a single heartbeat. It was the smile of a kid on a Christmas morning commercial, the kind that's all teeth and gums. But on Leo's pale, serious face, it looked stapled on. Wrong. Dr. Albright, a man with a voice as smooth as expensive whiskey and a handshake that was just a little too dry, guided him over. Maya, he said, beaming. We had a breakthrough today, a real connection. And then Leo looked up at me, his eyes somehow flat and distant behind that terrifying grin, and he whispered, hello, mother. The air went out of me. Mother? He'd never called me anything but mama. The word was a rusted hinge, a sound from a tune. But he was talking. Holy shit, he was actually talking. I choked back the unease, bundled him into the car, and cried the whole way home, telling myself I was being a paranoid bitch. My kid was back. That was all that mattered. But the smile never left. Not during dinner, when he chewed his mac and cheese with that same rigid grin. Not during his bath, as he stared at the water, whispering nursery rhymes I didn't recognize. Not even when I tucked him in, his small body stiff under the sheets. Night, baby, I whispered, brushing his hair back. His head turned on the pillow, the movement unnervingly smooth. The night is a blanket for the waking world, he whispered, the smile unwavering. Soon, we will all be awake. Goosebumps prickled my arms. What does that mean, sweetie? He just kept smiling. The one who smiles waits. It is almost time for the lesson. The next day, I started paying attention to the other Chrysalis kids. There was a pickup line of luxury SUVs and minivans, and every single kid who climbed in had the same exact smile. Not a variation. Same curve, same tooth exposure, same dead-eyed stare. They moved like a hive mind, blinking in unison as they listened to their parents' chatter. I saw one little girl drop her glittery water bottle. Before it even hit the pavement, 3 other kids' heads swiveled to track its fall, their smiles never faltering. It was a full-on creep show. That night, I went full detective mode after Leo was in bed. I poured a generous glass of bourbon, because let's be real, this situation called for it, and fired up my laptop. The Chrysalis Center had a website so clean it was sterile. Testimonials from thrilled parents, all dated within the last 6 months. No history. Dr. Alistair Albright had a thin digital footprint, a degree from a university in Switzerland I'd never heard of, and a handful of papers on vocal reclamation therapy, published in journals that sounded made up. The bourbon turned to acid in my stomach. This was bad juju. I dug deeper, into the weird shit, the places you go when rational explanations have packed their bags and left. I searched for the one who smiles. The results were a rabbit hole of nightmare fuel. Obscure forums mentions of an old cult, the Grinning Chorus, that believed in a primordial entity of enforced joy. They called it the one who smiles in the static, a being that sought to erase individual thought and bring about a silent, smiling unity. Their symbol was a spiral inside a crescent moon, a shape I'd seen Leo absently scratching onto his notebook. My blood ran cold. This wasn't therapy, it was grooming. The next morning, I called the center. Leo won't be coming back, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dr. Albright's sigh was patronizing. Maya, that's precisely what the trauma wants. Resistance. This is a critical stage. The final lesson is tonight. If he misses it, the regression could be permanent. What kind of lesson? I demanded. Integration, he said simply, and the line went dead. Screw that. I wasn't waiting for this thing to play out. I loaded a confused, smiling Leo into the car, but I didn't head for the Chrysalis Center. I drove to the one person in this godforsaken town who might believe me, Sarah, my older sister, a nurse with a bullshit detector that could pinpoint a lie from a mile away. I laid it all out on her kitchen table, the words tumbling out in a frantic mess. The smile, the whispers, the cult, the entity. Sarah listened, her face growing grimmer with each word. When I finished, she didn't call me crazy. She just said, "Let me see him." Leo was in the living room, standing perfectly still and staring at a blank wall. His smile was stretched so wide it looked like it must hurt. "Leo, honey," Sarah said softly. His head rotated slowly. "Aunt Sarah, your fear has a sour scent." Sarah flinched. She walked over to him, her nurse's eyes scanning. Gently, she took his face in her hands, her thumbs pressing near his temples. "Maya," she said, her voice tight. "Look at this." Just below his hairline, almost invisible, were two tiny, precise scars. Like something had been inserted. "It's not just psychological," she whispered. "They've done something to him. Implanted something. A microtransmitter, maybe, to synchronize them." It was the first real, physical proof. It made the horror concrete. And it gave me a target. That night was the final lesson. If I was going to stop this, I had to go to the source. I left Leo with Sarah, her shotgun loaded and resting on the kitchen table. "Shoot first, ask questions about the creepy cosmic smile god later," I told her, and she just nodded. The chrysalis center was dark, except for a single light burning in the back. The front door was unlocked. The inside smelled of lemony cleaner and something else underneath, something metallic and sweet, like old blood and ozone. The hallway was lined with drawings from the children, not the usual suns and stick figures. These were intricate, overlapping spirals and crescent moons, all drawn with an obsessive, unchildlike precision. I followed the low hum of chanting to a door at the end of the hall. I pushed it open a crack. The room was a circle. Dr. Albright stood in the center, but he wasn't the leader. He was just conducting. The children, a dozen of them, including a space where Leo should have been, stood in a ring, their faces upturned, their identical smiles glowing in the candlelight. They were chanting in unison, a low, guttural language that hurt my ears. Ngatha, Risa, Eftah, Shem for the one who smiles. And in the center of their circle, projected onto the wall, was a massive, shifting image of a spiral inside a crescent moon. But it was moving, pulsating, and from it, I could feel a wave of pressure. A force that wanted to smooth out my thoughts, to pull the corners of my mouth up into a blissful, vacant curve. This was it, the ritual. They were tuning the kids, using them as living antennas to call this thing forth. I burst into the room. "Stop!" The chanting ceased. The children's heads swiveled toward me in perfect unison, their smiles now seeming predatory. Dr. Albright turned, but he didn't look surprised. He looked tired. "Maya, you're too late. The chorus is complete. The gateway is opening. What have you done to my son?" I screamed, advancing on him. He spread his hands. "I've given him a purpose. A place in the grand design. No more pain, no more loneliness. Only unity, only joy." "That's not joy. It's a goddamn possession. It's an upgrade," a new voice said, sharp and clear. From the shadows behind the projection stepped a woman I recognized from the pickup line, Chloe's mom, a perfectly normal-looking woman in yoga pants. But her eyes held the same flat, fanatical light as Albright's. "We're not a cult, Maya," she said calmly. "We're a quarantine. For centuries, my family has served as jailers. The one who smiles is a parasite of consciousness, and it's always seeking a way in. The only way to keep it from consuming everyone is to give it a controlled population. A chorus. These children are its prison. Without them to focus on, it would bleed into the world, and everyone would be lost." My mind reeled. They weren't trying to summon it. They were trying to contain it by sacrificing my son and a dozen other kids to a fate worse than death. "You're insane," I whispered. "It's a necessary evil," Albright said, his shoulders slumping. "Your grandfather was the previous jailer. He grew weak, he hesitated, and the entity nearly broke free. We cannot make the same mistake. My grandfather, the clockmaker, the one who'd always given me the willies, who'd spoken in riddles about things that ticked outside of time." A fresh wave of horror washed over me. This was my inheritance. Not a shop full of clocks, but a legacy of feeding children to a monster. The projection on the wall swelled, the spiral beginning to spin faster. The air grew thick, and the pressure in my head intensified. The children's smiles widened, their jaws unhinging slightly, and a low, static-like hum began to emanate from their throats. The gateway was opening. I saw a metal rod used to adjust the projector lying on the floor. Without a second thought, I lunged for it. This wasn't about becoming a jailer or a victim. This was about being a mother. I didn't go for Albright or the woman. I went for the projector. I swung the rod with all my strength, smashing the lens. The image of the spiral flickered and died. A shriek of feedback filled the room, so loud it felt like my teeth would shake loose. The children staggered, their synchronized connection broken. Their smiles flickered, and for a glorious second, I saw confusion and terror in Leo's eyes. My real son. But the hum didn't stop. It grew louder, coming from them now. The ritual had gone too far. We hadn't stopped it, we'd broken the container. No, Albright screamed. You've destabilized the chorus. It will jump, it will take the nearest viable host. The static hum focused, coalescing, and shot from the disoriented children like a current of invisible lightning. It didn't go for Albright. It didn't go for the woman. It hit me. The world dissolved into television snow and a pressure so immense I thought my skull would crack. I felt a presence, vast and ancient and utterly alien, trying to sand down my memories, my love, my fear, my anger, trying to make me smooth and empty and happy. I fought it with every fiber of my being, clinging to the memory of Leo's real laugh, the weight of him sleeping in my arms, the sound of his voice before the accident. I fell to my knees, gripping my head. The entity recoiled. My pain, my grief, my messy, chaotic, human love, it was poison to this thing. It was too sharp, too complex. It couldn't digest me. The presence retreated, slithering back, searching for a simpler, more pliable mind. The children were shielded, their implants fried. Albright and the woman were protected by whatever foul magic they used. But there was one other person in the room whose mind was open, vulnerable, and trained for this exact moment. Dr. Albright's eyes went wide with terror. No, wait. The static streamed into his open mouth. His body convulsed, his back arching. His face went slack, and then, slowly, mechanically, it stretched into the same wide, terrible, unblinking smile. The smile of the one who smiles. He stood up, moving with a new, jerky grace. He looked at the terrified children, at the cult woman cowering in the corner, and finally at me. The voice that came out was no longer his. It was a chorus of whispers, the sound of a million satisfied sighs. It was the voice I had heard from my son. The lesson, it whispered through Albright's smiling lips, is adaptability. I scrambled backward, out of that room, out of that building, into the cold, sane night air. I had saved Leo. I had saved the children. But I hadn't destroyed the monster. I'd just given it a new, more knowledgeable vessel. I drove back to Sarah's, my whole body shaking. When I walked in, Leo ran to me and buried his face in my chest. He was crying. His real, beautiful, tear-streaked face was scrunched up in misery. He was himself. Mama, he sobbed. The bad man is gone. But the smiling thing, it's still here. It's looking for a new home. I held him tight, rocking him. I had won the battle. But the war was just beginning. The jailer was gone, the prison was compromised, and the thing that wore his smile was now loose in my town. And it knew exactly who had tried to stop it. It knew the bloodline of the woman who had been, for one moment, too human to break. The title of jailer was mine now, whether I wanted it or not. But my first duty wouldn't be to lock something away. It would be to teach my son how to fight. Because the next time the one who smiles came calling, we would be ready. We would have a lesson of our own.